It was December 12, 1978, 3 a.m. The wind screaming across the tarmac at JFK. This was not a robbery. This was the blueprint for chaos. 5 million United States dollars in raw, filthy cash. Nearly $1 million more in diamonds. A total of $5.87 million. Snatched in 64 minutes of surgical precision. No alarms. No witnesses. No shots fired. A ghost operation. The crew walked away legends. Their boss Jimmy the Gent Burke had won, but the nightmare had just begun. That vast fortune, it was radioactive. The terrifying whisper within 6 months, 4 men who celebrated that night, who knew the blueprint, were dead. Butchered. Not by the police, but by the very man who promised them freedom. Burke became the hunter. His own crew the targets. He feared their mouths more than the entire Federal Bureau of Investigation. Every handshake, every loyalty became a lie. The stakes were no longer the money, they were survival. The question that breaks the Mafia: what kind of poison turns brothers into bodies? What is the true cost of $5.875 million? This is the Lufthansa heist. A perfect crime that became a perfectly internal war. A warning that greed is the only enemy the mob cannot defeat. To understand the butchery that followed, we must first understand the betrayal that started it. The man who handed Jimmy Burke the keys to the kingdom was not a Lukey's family soldier. He was an insider. His name Louis Werner. Werner was a cargo agent. A nobody. But he was drowning in debt from compulsive gambling. And in the mob's world, debt is leverage. Werner had a connection to the crew through a low-level associate named Martin Krugman. And that connection was a desperate, screaming lifeline. Werner had a secret that changed everything: the sheer, unguarded volume of money moving through JFK. He revealed that Lufthansa routinely flew millions cash from United States military bases in Germany straight into cargo building 261. Untracked. Unprotected. Work's eyes saw a vault. Jimmy Burke saw a ticking clock. Werner didn't just give up a secret, he handed over the entire blueprint. He meticulously detailed the hangar's labyrinthine layout. He named the graveyard shift employees 10 men who would be on duty that night. He charted the precise time windows when security patrols were at their lowest ebb. He pointed to the exact location of the security locks, the main door alarm, and the double vault in the high-security currency room. Burke didn't need explosives. He didn't need a siege. He needed the courage to exploit a vulnerability that had been sitting there for years. The crew was assembled: 6 men, dressed in black, carrying .38 caliber revolvers. Their leader was Angelo Seep, cold and merciless. Their driver Parnell Stacks Edwards. Every man was given a single instruction: silence is survival. On the night of December 12th, in the blinding darkness of the airport, the team moved like specters. They drove a stolen black van straight onto the tarmac. The target: a simple door. That door was held by a single security guard named Kerry Whalen. Whalen was the first point of failure. At 3:00 a.m. the crew moved. Whalen was overpowered in seconds. The silence was chilling. "Don't try to be a hero," one of the masked figures whispered, his voice dangerously low. "New York will be the last place you ever see." The first lie had been spoken. The trap had been sprung. Now they were inside the beast's belly, completely exposed. But they knew exactly where to go. They knew exactly who to threaten. And they knew the heart of the cash lay in the double vault, guarded not by layers of steel, but by a simple fear, a fear that was about to be weaponized. The next stage depends on one terrified man opening a vault that held their destiny. The terrifying silence inside cargo building 261 lasted mere seconds. The crew, 6 masked humanoids, no faces, just intent, moved with the terrifying discipline of trained assassins. This was not chaos, this was choreography. Every step, every command, timed and rehearsed. Their first priority: total control. Led by Angelo Seep, the crew swept through the hangar, locating and corralling the 10 night shift employees. The workers, caught between sleep and terror, were swiftly forced into the narrow break room. Their hands were bound with zip ties. "Look at the floor." Seep's voice was a low, chilling rasp. "Look at us, and you die. Understand?" This threat was not theatrical, it was a promise kept by the Lukey's family. The seconds bled away, each one a risk. The plan relied on speed and knowledge. They didn't waste time smashing doors or cracking safes. They went straight for the target: the high-security currency room. Inside that room was the double vault. They found the employee designated to hold the keys, Rolf Rebman, a man whose life had just shrunk down to the size of a single brass lock. Rebman, shaking, was forced at gunpoint to stand before the steel barrier. The robbers knew the exact sequence, the exact locks to bypass, thanks to Werner's blueprint. This was the moment of truth. If Rebman hesitated, if he made a single mistake, the entire operation dissolved into a bloody shootout. But Rebman, faced with the cold, unforgiving muzzle of a .38 caliber revolver, complied. The lock clicked. The massive steel door swung open, revealing the currency cage. It was a staggering sight. Inside, canvas bags were stacked high, waiting for transport. Bags overflowing with cash. They were expecting a substantial haul, but the sight of the money exceeded even Jimmy Burke's wildest expectations. There was more than anyone had promised. Significantly more. Suddenly, the cold discipline wavered. A moment of pure, uncontrolled greed flashed through the crew. They began frantically tossing bags into laundry carts. They bypassed jewelry boxes, focusing solely on the stacks of cash, but quickly corrected, realizing the value of the gleaming diamonds and gold in the other vault. Every second now became a gamble. They had allocated their time with surgical precision. They knew the next patrol sweep was coming. They needed to move. They loaded the bags one by one into the stolen black van they had parked next to the cargo bay. No hesitation. No talking. Just the heavy thud of bags filled with millions of dollars being tossed into the back. At 4:04 a.m. they were gone. The entire operation, from overpowering the first guard to driving out the gate, took precisely 64 minutes. The Federal Bureau of Investigation would later marvel at the chilling efficiency. The only physical evidence left behind were the zip ties on the employees' wrists and the wide open, completely empty double vault. But as the crew sped away, adrenaline still pumping, they failed to recognize that the perfect execution had given birth to an immediate, crippling weakness: uncontrollable wealth. The money was too much. The score was too clean, and in the dark world of the Mafia, such a massive, flawless victory inevitably attracts two fatal forces: paranoia and betrayal. The crew had escaped the police. Now they just had to escape each other. The black van roared through the desolate New York streets, but inside, the victory was already turning sour. The crew hadn't just secured a haul, they had secured a staggering, unmanageable amount of wealth. The sheer volume of the $5.875 million created immediate, toxic pressure. Every glance, every hurried whisper, now carried a single, poisonous question: how much is truly mine? Jimmy Burke, the meticulous planner, saw not a bounty, but a ticking clock set to explode. He knew the rules of the game: massive success breeds massive paranoia. The higher the score, the higher the risk of a weak link breaking under pressure. The money was a magnet, drawing every law enforcement agency, every rival family, and worst of all, the relentless envy of his own men. Burke's first, most crucial command was simple, brutal, and non-negotiable: disposal. Every piece of evidence, the van, the guns, the clothing, had to be incinerated immediately. Failure meant death. The fatal flaw, the single, catastrophic misstep that would unravel the entire $6 million perfect plan, belonged to the getaway driver, Parnell Stacks Edwards. Edwards, a low-ranking associate, was overwhelmed by the magnitude of the score and the cheap high of victory. Instead of driving the stolen Ford van straight to the junkyard furnace as ordered, he stopped. He stopped 2 blocks from his girlfriend's apartment in Canarsie. He decided to smoke, celebrate, and sleep off the adrenaline. He simply forgot to dump the van. A tiny act of negligence. A moment of hubris fueled by intoxication. This single lapse of judgment would sign his death warrant and unleash a torrent of blood. The next day, the van, the indisputable smoking gun, still containing a crucial set of bloody fingerprints and a tire iron used to subdue the guards, was found by an ordinary sanitation department officer. The officer, realizing the significance, called the New York Police Department. The FBI was immediately alerted. The van was a direct, traceable line to the Bonanno family, specifically, to Jimmy Burke's crew. The Federal Bureau of Investigation now had an anchor point. They knew the vehicle type, the area of disposal, and they were already checking every local associate connected to that neighborhood. The search for Stacks began. When Burke heard the news, his calm veneer shattered. The discovery of the van was an amateur mistake, a screaming betrayal of his trust. His mind, always running 3 steps ahead, calculated the risk instantly. Edwards was weak. Edwards would fold. Edwards would talk to save his skin. And so, Burke made the ruthless decision that would define the rest of the operation: eliminate the weakness. Meanwhile, the first waves of friction began spreading through the crew over the division of the loot. Martin Krugman, the associate who connected Werner to Burke, started demanding a larger cut. Krugman was volatile, loud, and increasingly unstable. He kept pestering Burke, demanding more than his agreed share, threatening to expose the internal politics. Burke offered him a $30,000 temporary settlement. Krugman scoffed. He started talking to his girlfriend about the details, a reckless move that reached Burke's ears. The money had stopped being a reward and had become a curse, a deadly, contagious disease of mistrust. Burke now saw every one of his partners not as an ally, but as a potential informant, a loose end, a ticking bomb. The time for finesse was over. The time for the purge had begun. The discovery of the stolen van was the ignition, but Jimmy Burke's paranoia was the fuel. He knew the Federal Bureau of Investigation would quickly trace the vehicle to Canarsie, and then to Parnell Stacks Edwards. The simple math was inescapable. The longer Edwards lived, the shorter Burke's freedom. Burke didn't wait for the police to act. He executed the sentence immediately. Stacks Edwards was the first to pay the blood price. Within days of the van being found, 2 associates were dispatched to Edwards' apartment. Edwards, still high on his small-time fame, was found asleep. They woke him only long enough to realize his mistake. They shot him 6 times in the head and body. Execution, swift and brutal. The message was clear: negligence is unforgivable. But eliminating Edwards did nothing to calm Burke's spiraling fear. The money was still too big. The whispers were still too loud. The target shifted to Martin Krugman. Krugman was the middleman, the talker, the one who couldn't stop demanding more money and bragging to his girlfriend. For Burke, Krugman was a liability, a living receipt for the entire operation. Burke lured Krugman to a supposed meeting to discuss his bigger cut. Krugman walked in expecting cash. He received a death sentence. The end for Krugman was not quick. It was personal. Burke, fueled by rage and fear, participated directly in the butchery. Krugman was beaten, stabbed, and finally dismembered. His body parts were stuffed into a barrel and disposed of, ensuring his remains would never be found, a gruesome metaphor for how the Lukey's family erased loose ends. The purge became a cascade. 2 other crew members, Joe Manry and Robert McMahon, were next. They had begun plotting their own smaller scores, stealing from the money they were tasked with laundering. Burke's network, built on fear, caught wind of their double cross. Manry and McMahon were found strangled, their hands bound the exact same way they had bound the Lufthansa employees on the night of the heist. Ironic justice, cold and instantaneous. In total, at least 4 men, and likely more, vanished in the months following the December 12th success. The police were utterly bewildered. They were investigating a massive, sophisticated robbery, while the perpetrators were destroying themselves in a panicked frenzy of self-preservation. Burke's paranoia had achieved what the law could not. It paralyzed the operation. He had secured the money, but he had lost his crew, his sanity, and, ultimately, his freedom. He became a ghost in the city, constantly watching his back, haunted by the knowledge that every man he killed had died because of his own greed. This internal, terrifying bloodbath did more damage to the Lukey's family than any indictment. It taught everyone a dangerous lesson in the Mafia: the reward for success is often not wealth, but a bullet from the man standing next to you. The money had corrupted the bond of silence, turning trust into dust, and dust into blood. Before we reveal the final, definitive fate of Jimmy Burke and the last of the stolen cash, make sure you don't miss any of our deep dives into the criminal underworld. Hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications to unlock more secrets from the dark archives of history. Don't let the algorithms hide the truth. The purge had stopped the snitches, but the internal butchery was evidence itself. Jimmy Burke's reckless killings did not save him. Though never directly convicted for the Lufthansa heist, because he had eliminated the witnesses, his paranoid violence finally gave law enforcement the necessary leverage. Burke was ultimately arrested and convicted in 1982 for his involvement in a completely separate racketeering case. He was sentenced to 20 years and died behind bars in 1996. He spent his final years haunted, having achieved a fortune that earned him only a prison cell and eternal suspicion. Louis Werner, the source of the fatal tip, was also convicted and served time, his crippling debt finally repaid with a long stretch in federal prison. The final, staggering statistic: almost none of the $5.875 million was ever recovered. It simply vanished, absorbed by the Mafia's money laundering machine. The lesson: the Lufthansa heist failed, not because of a police investigation, but because of a single, corrosive internal force. The Mafia relies on omerta, the code of silence. But when a score is this massive, the bond of loyalty is weaker than the bond of money. Burke's actions proved a dangerous truth to the underworld: success breeds betrayal, and paranoia is the most efficient assassin. The money was never the prize. It was the poison that turned their greatest triumph into the most devastating act of self-destruction in organized crime history. Thank you for watching this Secret Files investigation. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more insights into the dark archives of crime.